My name is Michael Andrews. I'm a husband, a father, and a man who has spent most of his life devoted to God. I was raised in a loving Christian home, the kind where Sunday mornings meant church and evenings ended with family prayer. I grew up believing I had everything figured out. Heaven was real, hell was real, and the path to eternal life was laid out clearly in the Bible. Faith wasn't just something I practiced, it was who I was. For years, I served as a youth pastor in my local church, mentoring young people and guiding them on their spiritual journeys. I believed I was making a difference, living out my purpose in service to Christ. My days were filled with prayer meetings, Bible studies, and community outreach programs. To me, life was clear-cut. Good versus evil, heaven versus hell. I thought I understood the stakes. But what happened to me on a cold October evening 2 years ago changed my understanding of everything. It was the night I died. What I saw, who I encountered, and the message I was given altered my life forever. This is the story of how I came face to face with Lucifer and discovered a truth that left me trembling in awe of God's grace. If you love Jesus as much as we do, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss out on inspiring content like this. Now, let's talk about what happened during my shocking near-death experience. It was a typical Wednesday evening, and I was driving home from a midweek Bible study. The crisp October air made everything feel sharper, clearer. The leaves, painted in hues of orange and red, swirled across the empty road as my car headlights pierced the darkness. I remember feeling a deep sense of peace, reflecting on the evening's message about God's unfailing love. But in an instant, that peace shattered. Out of nowhere, a pair of blinding headlights appeared, barreling toward me. A pickup truck had veered into my lane, swerving erratically. There was no time to think, only react. I slammed the brakes, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The tires screamed against the asphalt, the car jerking violently as I tried to avoid the inevitable. And then, impact. The sound was deafening, a sickening crunch of metal twisting and glass shattering. My body was thrown forward, the seatbelt biting into my chest like a vice. Pain erupted everywhere, a searing, all-encompassing agony that made it impossible to breathe. The world spun, the chaos of screeching tires and blaring horns fading into a distant hum. I remember lying there in the wreckage, my vision blurring. The cold seeped into my body, and with it came an eerie silence. My chest heaved, desperate for air, but it felt like I was drowning. Fear gripped me, fear of what was happening, of what might come next. And then, something strange began to happen. The pain started to fade, replaced by a peculiar warmth that washed over me. My surroundings grew dim, the broken shards of glass and twisted metal dissolving into darkness. I felt weightless, as if I were being pulled away. Yet I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't know it then, but I was crossing over. Something, or someone, was waiting for me on the other side. The moment I left my body, it was as if every physical sensation dissolved into nothingness. No more pain, no more cold, no more weight. I floated above the wreckage, staring down at a sight that was equal parts surreal and horrifying. There I was, my body, twisted and limp against the mangled remains of my car. Paramedics rushed to the scene, their voices urgent but muffled, like hearing an echo underwater. I wanted to cry out, to tell them I was still here, but my voice was gone. My connection to the world was severed. And then, everything shifted. A force, a powerful, irresistible pull, dragged me upward. I wasn't flying or falling. It was something else entirely, like being drawn through a vast, unseen current. Around me, the darkness thickened, folding in on itself like storm clouds. It wasn't the comforting darkness of night. It was alive, oppressive, and suffocating. The air, if I could call it that, felt heavy, filled with an eerie vibration that made my soul tremble. Suddenly, I found myself in a tunnel. It stretched endlessly ahead, its walls shimmering with an unnatural glow, faintly red and pulsating like a heartbeat. Shadows swirled within the walls, figures that twisted and writhed, their forms indistinct but unmistakably human. Whispers filled the air, low, guttural, and filled with anguish. The sound seeped into my very being, sending chills through me despite the growing heat that surrounded me. I moved forward, not by choice, but by compulsion, as if the tunnel itself had a will, and I was subject to it. The whispers grew louder, transforming into agonized cries. Faces pressed against the tunnel walls, their eyes hollow, their mouths frozen in silent screams. Fear gripped me like a vice. Was this hell? Was I being punished? My mind raced with questions, each one more terrifying than the last. As I neared the tunnel's end, the heat became unbearable. It wasn't just physical, it was spiritual, a searing weight pressing down on my soul. A fiery glow appeared ahead, flickering like a flame, but far more sinister. The oppressive air thickened, and my fear turned to dread as I realized I wasn't alone. Out of the swirling shadows stepped a figure. He was tall, unnaturally so, with an aura that radiated both power and malice. His presence sucked the air from the space, leaving me gasping for relief. His eyes, piercing and dark, locked onto mine, and in that moment, I knew exactly who I was facing. Lucifer. He didn't look like the horned caricature I'd seen in illustrations. His face was unnervingly beautiful, almost angelic, but twisted by an expression of contempt and arrogance. His form shimmered, cloaked in darkness that seemed alive, swirling around him like living smoke. His voice, when he spoke, was deep and resonant, echoing through the tunnel as if the very walls carried his words. "So," he said, his lips curling into a mocking smile, "you've come to see what lies beyond your mortal shell. Tell me, Michael, was it worth it? All those years of faith, prayer, and service. Did it save you from ending up here?" My voice, though shaky, found its way back to me. "Where am I? What is this place? And why are you here?" He laughed, a sound that sent shivers through every part of me. "You're in the in-between, the space where souls come before their fate is sealed. And why am I here? Let's just say I'm a guide, a revealer of truths." His tone dripped with mockery, but there was an undertone of menace that made it clear he wasn't to be trifled with. I tried to step back, but there was nowhere to go. The tunnel closed in around us, the shadows pressing closer. "I don't belong here," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I'm a child of God." Lucifer's expression darkened. His eyes narrowed, and his smile twisted into a sneer. "A child of God? You think that title grants you immunity? Let me show you something." He extended his hand, and suddenly, the walls of the tunnel transformed into a vision, a horrifying tableau of my life. I saw moments I had forgotten, or perhaps tried to forget. Every harsh word, every selfish act, every sin I had committed played out before me. The weight of my failures bore down on me, each one more crushing than the last. Lucifer leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. "This is who you are, Michael. Not the righteous man you pretend to be, but this, a sinner. Tell me, where is your God now?" Tears streamed down my face as shame consumed me. I felt small, insignificant, and utterly unworthy. For a moment, I believed him. I believed that I was beyond redemption, that my sins had condemned me. But then, something stirred within me, a faint but unmistakable light. "No," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "This isn't the whole story. Yes, I've sinned, I've fallen short. But I serve a God who is greater than my failures. His grace is sufficient, and His mercy endures forever." Lucifer recoiled, his expression darkening further. The shadows around him flared angrily, but I felt the warmth of that light growing stronger within me. "Your lies won't work on me," I continued. "You may show me my sins, but you can't erase the blood of Christ that covers them." His laughter returned, but this time it was tinged with frustration. "We'll see," he said, his voice cold and venomous. The choice isn't yours to make. You'll see the truth soon enough." With that, the tunnel began to collapse. The shadows writhed violently, and the oppressive heat intensified. Lucifer's figure faded into the darkness, his mocking laughter echoing in the distance. I felt myself being pulled again, this time upward, away from the suffocating weight of the tunnel. As I ascended, the heat gave way to coolness, the darkness to light. It was faint at first, like a distant sunrise, but it grew stronger with each passing moment. The cries of despair faded, replaced by a gentle, harmonious hum that filled me with an overwhelming sense of peace. I knew then that I was heading towards something greater, a place where Lucifer's lies held no power. But the journey wasn't over yet. What lay ahead would change me forever. As I ascended from the oppressive darkness, a radiant light began to fill the space around me. At first, it was a soft glow, barely distinguishable from the shadows I had just escaped. But soon, it intensified, growing brighter and purer than anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just light. It was life itself, warm and all-encompassing. The closer I drew to it, the more I felt the weight of my fear, guilt, and shame dissolve. Then I saw him. At the center of the light stood a figure, his form both human and transcendent. He radiated an authority that could not be questioned, yet his presence exuded such compassion and love that it overwhelmed me. His robe shimmered with a white so brilliant it seemed to contain the essence of purity itself, and his eyes, oh, his eyes, pierced straight into my soul. They weren't just looking at me, they were looking through me, seeing every thought, every action, every part of who I was. I fell to my knees, not out of fear, but out of an instinctive recognition that I was in the presence of someone infinitely greater than myself. Tears streamed down my face as the weight of the moment pressed upon me. I wanted to speak, but words failed me. Then he spoke. "Michael," he said, his voice gentle but filled with power, like the sound of rushing waters. "Do not be afraid. Stand and let us talk." With trembling limbs, I rose to my feet, still unable to meet his gaze directly. "Lord," I whispered, though I wasn't sure how I knew it was him. Am I dead?" He smiled, a smile so full of grace that it brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes. "You are here because there is something you need to see, something you must understand before you return." "Return?" I asked, my voice quaking. "Am I going back?" "That is not for you to decide," he replied. "But first, there are truths you must face and lessons you must learn." Suddenly, the space around us shifted. The light dimmed slightly, revealing a vast expanse filled with images, snapshots of my life. Every significant moment, both good and bad, unfolded before me. I saw my childhood innocence, my teenage mistakes, my adult successes, and my failures. But it wasn't just the actions that were laid bare. It was the intentions behind them, the hidden motives of my heart. I couldn't bear it. "Lord, I've failed you," I cried. "I thought I was living for you, but I see now how selfish and prideful I've been. I've sinned so many times, hurt so many people. How could you ever forgive me?" He stepped closer, and the light around him enveloped me like a warm embrace. "Michael, my child, do you not know? My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." His words echoed the scripture I had so often read, but never truly grasped. "But I've done so much wrong," I whispered. "Lucifer showed me. He showed me everything." His expression grew serious, but not harsh. "The enemy is a liar," he said, his voice firm. "He twists truth into chains to bind the souls of men. Yes, you have sinned, but you are not defined by your sin. You are defined by my sacrifice." He stretched out his hands, and I saw the scars. The marks in his palms, evidence of the crucifixion, glowed faintly with the same light that surrounded him. "These," he said, "are the proof of my love for you. I bore your sins, every one of them so you could be free. Do not let the enemy deceive you into thinking you are beyond redemption. I fell to my knees again, overcome with a mix of sorrow and joy. Lord, I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. He knelt beside me, placing a hand on my shoulder. No one deserves it, Michael. That is why it is called grace. It is a gift, freely given, not earned. But with that gift comes a responsibility, a calling. You must live as a reflection of my love, a beacon to those still lost in the darkness. The scene shifted once more, and I was shown a vision of people, faces I recognized, and many I didn't. Some were smiling, their eyes filled with hope. Others were weeping, their expressions marked by despair. These are the lives you have touched, he said, and those you are yet to touch. You were placed on earth for a purpose, Michael. Your journey is not finished. Go back and tell them what you have seen. Tell them of my love, my mercy, and my truth. The realization hit me like a tidal wave. My life had meaning far beyond what I had imagined. It wasn't about my successes or failures, but about how I allowed God to work through me. It wasn't about being perfect, but about being willing. Lord, I said, my voice steady now, I will go back. I will tell them. But please help me. I can't do it on my own. You were never meant to, he replied with a smile. I will be with you always, to the very end of the age. With those words, the light grew brighter, enveloping everything. I felt myself being pulled away, back toward the world I had left behind. But this time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I was filled with a peace and purpose I had never known before. The last thing I heard as the light faded was his voice, gentle and loving. Remember, Michael, my strength is made perfect in your weakness. Go and live for me. When I woke up, it was as though I was stepping into a new life. My body ached from the crash, the sterile smell of the hospital surrounding me, but I felt none of the despair or confusion that had overwhelmed me before. Instead, my heart was filled with a peace so profound that it defied understanding. The doctors called it a miracle. You're lucky to be alive, one of them said, shaking his head in disbelief. The kind of injuries you sustained, most people wouldn't have made it. But I knew it wasn't luck. I had been given a second chance, a chance to live not for myself, but for the one who had saved me. As I lay in that hospital bed, memories of the experience flooded my mind. The encounter with Lucifer, the lies he tried to trap me with, and the light of Christ that had shattered those chains. It was all so vivid, so real. I couldn't stop thinking about his words. Go and tell them. But how? How could I, an ordinary man with so many flaws, possibly convey the magnitude of what I had seen and heard? The doubt crept in, but it didn't take hold like it used to. Because now, I knew the truth. I didn't have to rely on my own strength. God's power would work through me, just as he had promised. The days following my recovery were marked by an overwhelming desire to share my story. At first, I told my family. My wife wept as I described the moments when I had hovered between life and death, my soul teetering on the edge of eternity. It's not just a story, I told her. It's a calling. I have to share this with the world. And so, I began. It wasn't easy. When I first spoke about my experience at church, I was met with mixed reactions. Some were moved to tears, their faith reignited by my testimony. Others were skeptical, questioning whether what I described was real or just a hallucination brought on by trauma. It stung, but I remembered Christ's words. The enemy is a liar. I wasn't doing this to convince everyone. I was doing this to glorify God and to reach those who were ready to hear the truth. Over time, the skepticism faded into the background, eclipsed by the lives that were being transformed. People began coming to me, sharing their own struggles, doubts, and fears. Your story gave me hope, one young man said. I was ready to give up. But now I see that God hasn't abandoned me. This was the purpose I had been searching for my entire life. It wasn't about perfect sermons or flawless actions. It was about being a vessel, letting God's light shine through my brokenness. My understanding of faith had shifted completely. Before, I thought it was about doing all the right things, checking all the boxes, and avoiding mistakes. But now, I understood that faith wasn't about me at all. It was about surrender, letting go of my pride, my fear, and my need for control, and trusting that God's grace was enough. I also realized that life was a precious gift, one that could be taken in an instant. The accident had taught me the fragility of existence, but my experience in the spiritual realm had shown me its eternal significance. Each day became an opportunity to live with purpose, to love others as Christ loved me, and to share his message with everyone I could. There were challenges, of course. Some people mocked me, dismissing my story as fantasy. Others questioned my motives, accusing me of seeking attention. But their words couldn't shake me. I had seen the truth, felt the overwhelming power of God's love, and nothing could take that away. Now, as I stand here before you, sharing my testimony, I can't help but feel both humbled and emboldened. Humbled by the enormity of God's grace and emboldened by the responsibility to share it. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. No matter how far you think you've fallen, no matter how unworthy you feel, God's love is greater. His grace is sufficient, and his light can pierce even the deepest darkness. So, I leave you with this. Live with purpose, seek the truth, and never forget that you are loved by the one who created you, the one who gave everything to bring you back to him. And if you love Jesus as much as I do, be sure to subscribe to this channel, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss an opportunity to hear about his love and power. Let's share this truth with the world, together.